That's called a transition, baby.
Yeah. Did the new Cascade go wrong somehow?
I can't believe it.
I've heard, I can't say I'm following it all that closely, but it sounds like it's going bad for the exact reasons one would expect. So, how about you walk me through this?
Okay.
You got your finger on the pulse a little bit more tightly than I do.
I got my finger on the pulse. I got my finger on the pulse a couple of days ago via Tommy Ashton because I saw some complaining on Twitter about the Discover mechanic from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, a set I know very little about. And so I decided to peruse around and see what was everyone complaining about, as the Magic community is one to complain about everything and nothing. So this is effectively Cascade, but the spell has to resolve. So I'll give you an example. There's Geological Appraiser, 2RR, 3/2, Human Artificer. When Geological Appraiser enters the battlefield, if you cast it, discover 3. And then that says, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less. Cast it without paying its mana cost, or put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So unlike Bloodbraid Elf Cascade, Bloodbraid Elf, you cast it, Cascade goes in the stack right away. Discover it, the thing actually has to resolve, and then you discover. And then with Bloodbraid Elf, you don't have to cast the card, obviously, that you Cascade into, and then just goes back. It goes in the bottom of your deck. And then with Discover, if you choose not to cast the card, like let's say you hit a removal spell, you just get to grip it.
Yeah, I think that is a bad change to the mechanic.
All right, game designer Patrick. Tell me your thoughts on Discover, and then I can tell you all the stupid things it's doing in Magic, which is basically you resolve a Discover card and you win the game immediately.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
So I want to separate Cascade into 2 camps.
Okay.
There is the Bloodbraid Elf in Jund, ostensibly fair sort of value engine. That's one camp.
Okay.
There's the second camp, which is just Demonic Tutor plus Omniscience, the same card over and over again.
Sure. Okay.
The second thing is bad. I'll talk about that later. The first thing, at the right rate, is, I think, a pretty positive thing. And I know Cascade gets a lot of flack for, being random. So I want to talk a little bit about that specifically. When Bloodbraid Elf is your best Cascade card, and you're playing it just because it's just a good rate card.
Sure.
I would offer a couple of positive things that it does. And I know the deck was probably too good in Standard, and the frequency with which you're playing against it exacerbates the feeling of randomness and just how repetitive it is. But let's assume that that Jund deck was one of the 3 best decks in a Standard format instead of just the best deck by far.
Okay, sure. I'll play along.
So Bloodbraid Elf is a 3/2 haster for 4 with some card advantage-y stuff implied. A deck that wants to both play a 3/2 haster and do something with it, which the decks do, like you attack, you clear out a blocker, you do that, whatever. You have to play a pretty varied game and a pretty flexible game, because you are paying for a combination of offense and defense.
Okay. And
usually Magic rewards you a lot for just doing one thing or the other. So a deck that plays that is going to have, ideally some aggressive and some defensive elements, which the Jund decks do. It will probably put a premium on a lot of interaction, because you need to play catch up mana wise when you're paying 4 mana for a 3/2 haster. And the deck did plenty of that too. Plenty of removal, discard, planeswalkers with interaction, that sort of thing. I also appreciate that the cards that you choose to put in your deck around it are informed by Bloodbraid Elf, but not because it's demonic tutoring, but because you're changing kind of the odds of getting certain things. Like, if you are theoretically building a Jund deck and your last card, should I cut this Inquisition in my deck for like an extra grist? And it's like, well, the grist is certainly a higher ceiling thing to be hitting off the Bloodbraid Elf, but you also need to be sensitive to doing stuff in the first couple of turns, because you are going to be playing catch up. And even if you like hit a good 3, if you're kind of not doing anything for the first couple of turns, that's not going to catch you all the way back up. And decisions like that are like, those are real things. People who build Jund decks, like, that's thinking about the distribution of how much do I want to have early interaction versus how much do I want to just be trying to spike a bunch, is like reasonable. People can disagree. And also it's not fake, in part because no matter what you choose, you are also drawing and casting the cards in your deck anyway. So it's not just, I'm tutoring for grist all the time. It's no, sometimes I draw one of my grists and I just cast it. Let's see what that looks like.
Yeah.
And the Jund deck has a bunch of, often cards like, let's say Scavenging Ooze, which could be a really good thing to hit against a certain class of opponent, but is also just kind of fine on its own most of the time. And a lot of the cards that the Jund deck plays are kind of in that space of, it's really good against a lot of the opponents, but it's still okay against everyone else. And I am drawing it and casting it and just making do with that more often than I'm cascading into it. So those are all things that I see as positives of the Cascade experience as it pertains to competitive constructed.
Okay.
I would like you to, if you have a response to that, I would like that before I talk about the second thing.
I do not have a response to that.
Okay. The second thing is horseshit. It's insane. And I cannot believe the rules are accommodate this and have not been fixed. My suggested rules change would just be the Cascade Zeros, the things with no mana cost on them,
living and hypergenesis, etc.
They don't have a mana cost. Not that they have a mana cost of 0. My ideal rule set would basically, and to contrast with, Signal Ornithopter, which actually has a mana cost of 0.
It's a 0 in the
so that's a 0 mana card, right? That makes sense. I would like to be in a world where the Cascades, those kind of Cascade Zeros, don't interact with things that call out mana costs. So you can't cascade into them. I can't Inquisition them out of your hand because they don't have a casting cost of 3 or less. They don't have a casting cost at all. And if the rules, if a particular card or interaction comes up where the game literally cannot proceed without giving it some cost, let's say ad nauseum, that it counts as 0.
Okay, sure. Okay.
And that would fix all this shit. I would argue it's actually more consistent with Magic's rules in a lot of ways, because like lands, they don't cost 0, they have no cost.
Yeah, that's true.